right, without further ado, my hubby, Bruce.
Hey guys, Shabbat Shalom. It just feels really good to be here with you guys, and I know not everyone's here, but I want to give a shout out to the folks that do drashes. I mean, when you stand up here, you don't really realize what you're saying, whether it's making an impact or not, and every drash is just floors me. I'm really proud and amazed at the depth of spiritual insight, knowledge that you guys bring. So I just want to give an attaboy for people doing drashes. Nothing is as easy as it looks, including a drash, but I really get fed through the drashes, and I really appreciate it. So anyway, I hope everybody had good holidays, and probably most everybody had Friday off. And, a day off is a day off. And I was just thinking, we don't do Christmas, but it's the one day of the year, for my work anyway, that unless it's just an absolute emergency, no one's going to call, no one's going to bother you. They're going to do their very best to sort of honor the day. And just the thought came to me that there will be a day when that's true for all of God's appointed times, right? And it's a given that you're going to hurry to get the trash taken off before sundown because Shabbat is coming, right? And all your neighbors might be there too. It's a reminder that, there are better times coming. And there are times coming when it won't be so incredibly awkward to walk out our faith. Maybe it's not awkward for everyone. But, the world is not in sync with what we're trying to do a lot of times. And so, there is coming a time where it's just going to be normal, natural. It's a given. And I'm really looking forward to that. But we are getting a taste of that now. So I'm grateful for now also. So anyway, this week's Parsha, of course, is Vayigash. And there's one more Parsha that still deals with Joseph, but we're coming around the third base, I guess. So I know we all know this story, but I'll just review it for my own sake, I guess. Joseph has put his brothers through a whole series of tests leading up to this week's Parsha. And of course, last week, you remember the brothers, they thought they were finally in the clear. They got food. They are going home with Benjamin. They're not going to break their father's heart. And but lo and behold, Joseph has one more test for him, and he plants a divining goblet, I believe, a cup in Benjamin's bags, and they haul them all back before what they thought was the Egyptian governor, the person that had, sort of had their lives by a string, could do anything he wanted to them. And but of course it's Joseph. So Judah, interestingly, he plucks up the courage to speak directly to Joseph. And, it's neat to talk about it, and I probably can't repeat it all exactly as it is. I was like, well, Judah's not the oldest, so it really wouldn't be his place. But my kids reminded me that the three other brothers ahead of him had sort of fallen out of favor for one reason or another along the way. So in a sense, maybe Judah was the right person to do it. But I think we have our first scripture, Genesis 44:18. When Yehudah approached Joseph and said, "Please, my lord, let your servant say something to you privately, and don't be angry with your servant, for you are like Pharaoh himself." So again, Judah speaking on behalf of the whole family. And, maybe it is foreshadowing that Judah's stepping up to the plate because remember the line of Davidic kings would come out of the tribe of Judah, and of course Yeshua, our Messiah. So Judah begged Joseph not to take Benjamin as a slave, but to keep himself as a slave instead. And again, remember back, it was Judah's idea to sell Joseph into slavery. So how the tables have turned. But it's been about 20 years have passed, so I think Joseph has changed through his experiences, and the brothers have changed as well. But it's kind of ironic that Judah, who was sending Joseph into slavery, is now begging to be made a slave in Benjamin's stead. Next verse is Genesis 45:3. Well, I'm missing some synapses here, at least in my order. So, again, Judah's begging. Joseph can't take it anymore. He sees that his brothers, their hearts have changed truly. And so Joseph said to his brothers, of course, after he cleared the room, and we can probably assume that he said it in Hebrew, right? Which would have been shocking. He was speaking in Egyptian through an interpreter, kind of maintaining the ruse. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is it true that my father is still alive?" His brothers couldn't answer him. They were so dumbfounded at seeing him. So you put yourself in their shoes. They were terrified of Joseph the Egyptian, and maybe they're equally terrified as Joseph, their brother, because they know what they've done to him. A lot of times elapsed, but it would have been really shocking. But Joseph steps in and he reassures them in Genesis 45:5. Don't be sad that you sold me into slavery here, or angry at yourselves, because it was God who sent me ahead of you to preserve life. And he goes further to say in verse 8, so it was not you who sent me here, but God, and he has made me a father to Pharaoh, Lord of all his household, and ruler over the whole land of Egypt. So I'm guessing there's a lot of, it says there's a lot of crying and snotting and just ugly crying going on. But they're reconciled, and Joseph sends his brothers back to Jacob in style with lots of food and gifts and wagons to bring Jacob and the whole family back. Of course, Jacob still, after 20 years of essentially mourning for his son, he can't believe his ears. He starts to believe his eyes. But, he still has a lot of doubts. And one big doubt that we see is that, God, he knows the promises of Abraham. He knows the promises of Isaac, and he knows the promises that God has made directly to him. And he's supposed to be in the land. He's not supposed to be in Egypt. So along the way, he offers sacrifices. And God speaks to him. I believe that's Genesis 15:3. Oh, excuse me. Don't go there yet. So I want to point out, again, he has this, he's not sure about going to Egypt. And if we go back just to Genesis 15:13, remember that Abraham had a really horrible dream. And he woke up kind of freaked out. And God said to him, Adonai said to Avram, know this for certain. Your descendants will be foreigners in a land that is not theirs. They will be slaves and held in oppression there for 400 years. So again, along the way at Beersheba, Jacob stops to offer sacrifices to God. He's still in the land at that point. The father reassures Jacob in a vision at night about going to Egypt. Genesis 46:2. In a vision at night, God called to Israel, Yaakov, Yaakov. He answered, here I am. He said, I am God, the God of your father. Don't be afraid to go down to Egypt. It is there that I will make you a great nation. Not only will I go down with you to Egypt, but also I will bring you back here again after Joseph has closed your eyes. So basically, they make their way to Egypt. The whole family are reunited again. And even though God's taking them to a foreign land, he takes them to a very special place in that land, of course, to Goshen. And it's good for agriculture, and that was the reason they said, hey, we keep animals, and the Egyptians really weren't too keen on that. So yeah, you guys go over there separate by yourselves, but I never really thought about it, but there was purpose in that, and that was to keep the people from being influenced by Egyptian culture. And it's not that Egyptians are particularly any worse than any other group in the world, but again, they don't have the same gods, they don't have the same values, and It's important for us. We are in the world, but not to be of the world. So it's just another reminder that it's okay to be separated a little bit. We don't need to be mean and nasty to people, but there is value to separating yourself out. Of course, we homeschool, so we get all the questions like, your kids are just going to be weird and, awkward. And I said, well, yeah, they will be weird and awkward in the sense that they won't know popular culture. They won't really understand some of the jokes and things like that. And we're not there yet, but that's the goal. We're trying to create a Goshen where they can grow and develop outside of the world, knowing that one day they will have to go into the world. And so far, it's kind of mostly working out okay, sort of. No, you guys are doing great to the kids. So anyway, they were separated out into Goshen. And again, lots of crying and snotting and hugging, and none of this would have happened in 2020 because you got international travel, you got groups larger than 10. 70 people, that's too many. All touching each other and crying on each other. It just wouldn't have worked. So God has his timing, right? This wouldn't be a good time to go down to Egypt. But anyway, so that's a really quick overview of Vayigash. There's lots and lots and lots of rich stuff there. But something kind of got stuck in my mind for this week. And we know this, but it's good to kind of review that there are, Joseph is a type and shadow of Yeshua. Again, God's a God of patterns, and he kind of gives us an insight, a look at the future a lot of times by things that are happening right now. And of course, we have the benefit of being able to read it in the Bible, but I think it always applies. What has God done before? He's probably going to do something similar along the same lines. So through Torah study, at least, this was new to me, but one title for Yeshua as Messiah is Mashiach ben Yosef, Messiah, son of Joseph, because Yeshua suffered like Joseph. And so there's lots and lots of parallels. I started making my own list. I got most of a page, and I said, there's this internet thing. I could probably look that up. And turns out there's at least 100, if not more, parallels between Joseph and Yeshua, and I'm only going to do 75 of them, so we're good. But I will run through some of them quickly, and I might have a comment or not. There's scripture references if you can write really fast, but you forget, Joseph was the result of a miraculous birth. Of course, Yeshua was born of a virgin, but Jacob was 90 years old. Rachel was barren. The clock had elapsed on that. So that's one thing they have in common. The next thing, of course, they were hated for telling the truth and prophesying. I think Joseph is a little different in the sense that, and maybe I'm just reading this into it, that he was young. He didn't have the wisdom to sort of hold back a little bit. I know I still struggle with that, If I like it, if it's my idea and I'm excited about it, I'm just going to talk and talk and talk about it. And maybe Joseph should have been a little more careful about how he revealed the visions and the dreams. And that can apply to ourselves. Sometimes we're on the right track, but it doesn't mean that, we have sort of like a no-limit credit card to spend on that. It's true, this might be what God's doing or what he's doing in us, but, it doesn't mean that, everyone else has to fall right in line with what you're doing, or maybe they have some other things they're doing. It's just, I get a little too enthusiastic sometimes. So anyway, but they were both hated for telling the truth and prophesying. What's the next one? They were both destined to become kings from birth. And as we read and study, that wasn't necessarily obvious in Yeshua's youth, right? The father, Yeshua was fully human, and not all of that was necessarily fully given to him all at once, right? And same for Joseph, that go along the same lines. Like, God showed him some things, but he didn't know the end of the story. He didn't know exactly how that was going to happen and all of that. So what's the next one? They were both persecuted out of jealousy. Joseph probably didn't handle things quite the right way, but his brothers definitely didn't handle it the right way. And if you remember back, they couldn't even speak civilly to him. And I'm sure there were plenty of nasty words and curses back in that day as well. And name calling and all the things we do, when we have a problem with someone, we want to get a rise out of them. So, Yeshua, we think most dominantly about the religious leaders, right? They were jealous of Yeshua. And I think it's Nicodemus. I've been watching I can't think of the name of it now. The Chosen, yeah, thank you guys. Nicodemus, he was looking to Yeshua. He realized that there was something special about Yeshua. So in The Chosen, Nicodemus couldn't cast out the demon, but Yeshua could. So Nicodemus didn't get jealous. He wanted to know, right? What happened? How did you do that? Who are you? And then you have, in contrast, the other religious leaders, which we could easily be one of those guys. We don't want to be too haughty about it. They were jealous, right? Instead of trying to find out who Yeshua was, they were kind of upset that Yeshua was more popular than they were. So, next slide. Didn't think about this. They were both stripped of their robes. So, Joseph, he had this really special robe. Yeshua, of course, they put a robe on him in a mocking way, but they both were stripped of their robes. Okay? Judah, of course, offered to sell Joseph for 20 pieces of silver. We didn't tell Judah this for a long time, but he figured it out eventually. Judah in Greek is Judas. It's the same name. So Judah sold Yeshua for 30 pieces of silver. And I didn't go really research this. This is always a good way to start something. But according to one person anyway, that the 20 and the 30 pieces of silver was the cost of a slave. And that, you have inflation even in the Bible, so that essentially those were the same amounts of money that were paid. The next slide. Uh-oh. We're all in trouble. Oh, that's somebody else. I panicked for a second there. Thought, hey, I just lost a sheet. Anyway, they both were taken to Egypt in their youth. Of course, Yeshua, to escape Herod, they went to Egypt. But Joseph also was taken to Egypt, obviously. Next slide. This was a good thing, I thought, an interesting thing. When you read about people in the Bible, they're generally always pretty flawed in a lot of ways, and God uses them anyway. But the Bible, best I can tell, doesn't record any specific sin from Joseph. So maybe he was a little too forward with his dreams, but essentially they never said, there's no Bathsheba, there's no, you pick your character. I mean, they always kind of had some trouble along the way. And of course, we know Yeshua was without sin as well. Next slide. Also interesting, the parallels. Both given all power and authority, save one. So Joseph was numero dos, right? It's kind of amazing that Pharaoh gave him all this power, but only Pharaoh was more powerful than Joseph. And of course, Yeshua, the Father, he always deferred to the Father. So another interesting parallel. All right, next slide. They both began their ministry about 30 years old. And next slide. They tested their brothers for worthiness. And next slide. Both Joseph and Yeshua suffered according to a predetermined plan. So it was already laid out. And it's not that what we do doesn't make a difference, but the big plans, you're not going to change. God's going to do what he needs to do. So it didn't make it easy for Joseph or Yeshua, but it was a predetermined plan. And then this must be number 75 out of 100. Next slide. In both stories, intentional harm was turned to good, right? The enemy wanted to kill Yeshua. The religious leaders wanted to kill Yeshua. Joseph's brothers wanted to be rid of him. Potiphar's wife wanted to be rid of Joseph. It's just amazing the parallels, and there really, literally are 100. Maybe there's a couple hundred of these parallels. So it's good to review through it. So, in next week's parsha, I'm going to steal from next week, so hopefully it won't be too amazing. Y'all have something to work with. Just one verse, Genesis 50, 20 through 21. Next parsha, Jacob, he dies. And still, Joseph's brothers didn't feel safe. They were certain that Joseph was now that Jacob had died, that he was finally going to deal out the paybacks they thought they deserved. But Joseph responded with reassurance. You meant to do me harm, but God meant it for good, so that it would come about as it is today, with many people's lives being saved. So don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your little ones. In this way, he comforted them, speaking kindly to them. Praise God. So, when you read through any part of the Bible, but including this, you're really yanked back and forth, and you look at the people of Israel, it's just sort of the highs and the lows. Things are going kind of well, and then they go horribly wrong. But going good again, and then not so good again. And if we think about it, I'm sure we all do, we could insert our name in any one of these Bible characters and say, I had the blessings, and now I'm reaping the cursings. I was with God, and now I'm without God. And, so what's it all about? What's the deal, God? Is this the process that we just have to go through? Is this punishment, for my own failings? And I thought of Garrett, it's both and. So it's both of those things and some more stuff too. He is dealing with our shortcomings, but he's also in the process of fulfilling his grand plan. He can do both at the same time. And he's doing a lot more than that, a lot of stuff that we aren't going to understand this side of the grave. And it's okay to try. It's good to try. But at some point, you have to just let it go and say, okay, the Father has this. I know what I know. I've done all I can do. And I have to trust the Father that he knows what he's doing, because he does, of course. But we have to remind ourselves of that. And Sandra said to me, first thing this morning, we've got to remember Father's in control, and it's absolutely right. And with the politics and the pandemics, and those are the big things, and all of us have our own little crises inside our own lives that we just got to take a breath. I'm preaching to myself. Step back and know that the Father has his plan. You're not going to mess up his plans. We do want to be able to come along with him, right? We want to be part of it, and he's going to help us do that. And even with our shortcomings. And it's hard it all gets swirled together, right? It all gets mixed up. Is this the blessing, the curse? Did I do it? Did God do it? It's probably a little bit of everything. So, again, you think about Joseph. He was in the cistern. He was in jail. He was separated from his family. He didn't know, he knew about the bowing down and all of that, but, what did he know past that? And it had been 20 long years. 20 years is a long time, if you ask me, to maintain the faith. He didn't seem to complain and whine and lose his mind. He did what he knew to do, right? And he did it as unto the Lord through those 20 years. He also didn't take revenge when he finally had the chance, right? Maybe it took 20 years to not want to take revenge. I'm not sure, but time does help sometimes. So just because things are terrible at the moment doesn't mean you're in the wrong place. It doesn't mean you're doing the wrong things. God has his plan. All right, I'm totally lost now. So both and. So God's doing these great big things that we'll never even understand. He's doing things individually for us, like made our way, just for what Bruce needs, what Garrett needs, what Gustavo needs. He knows us individually. But he's also doing work in us that involves the people around us and the world around us. So he's doing all of those things at the same time. So anyway, in conclusion, take heart. On the one hand, we'll probably mess it up a little or even a lot as we walk with God. On the other hand, you can be sure that God's not surprised and he has a plan for it and it's going to be okay. So, Shabbat Shalom.